Welcome to today's podcast. Over here, the Smart Debt Relief Podcast with Chris Cupp. I am your host, Chris Cupp. We're going to start videotaping these podcasts. So we put them onto our YouTube and our Facebook and maybe our Instagram, depending how long they go. This podcast is going to kind of go over the last week, go over some people's situations. See if it, the reason I like to go over people's situations, that if people are watching or listening to the podcast can kind of relate to those person's situation, to see if it's something that maybe that can relate to their lives. So first and foremost, I thank you very much for downloading this and listening to this or watching this. It'll be out later on today or tomorrow. Today's Wednesday, the 4th of September. And let's go over this. I'm going to be looking down a little bit because I have some notes here. And first and foremost, going to go over someone's situation. I talk a lot about these three common situations that people are in that get into debt settlement that we're helping. It's very important that I keep going over that, because if someone's in a situation where they don't have any money left over at the end of the month when they're done paying their bills, if they don't have any money in the bank, and they don't foresee any increase in income in the near future, if they continue to keep on that route of just making minimum payments towards their credit cards, it's going to take them forever. Again, we've gone over this before, but all you got to do is take a look at that minimum payments schedule, the minimum payment warning on any of your statements. It'll show you how long it's going to take to pay off your debt by just making minimum payments. The reason I go over that all the time is because speaking to someone last week, she was in her early 50s. Her situation is she doesn't have any money left over at the end of the month. She's current on all of her debts, okay? But she's maxed out on everything. She has no ability to charge on the credit cards, and she's been using all of her income and all of her savings. So now she's in a situation where she doesn't have any money left over at the end of the month. She doesn't have any money in savings to pay down her debt. But we go over that third one. Do you foresee any increase in income in the next couple months or month to actually pay down your debts? And in her case scenario, she has a retirement that's kicking in the next couple months. She's going to receive an additional $2,400 a month starting in February of next year. So by looking at her budget and looking at where she's at, going into a debt settlement program wouldn't be the best thing for her, because she's going to have the ability to pay that additional $2,400 a month towards the debt to pay off her debt. So let's take a look at her financial situation to see if it's something that you can relate to on your side of things. So she has $30,000 in credit card debt. Okay, she's all by herself. She makes about $3,500 a month after taxes, and when she does all of her budgeting, she has about $300 left over, $250 left over at the end of the month, after making her minimum payments, after making her house payment, after making insurance. Her budget is pretty slim, so she has about $250 left over. So she has no money in savings. My suggestion to her and what she decided to go with was to, build up a little bit of money in savings for her emergency account. So continue to keep making these minimum payments. Continue to, of course, make your housing payments. You want to make sure your house, your car, anything that is secured is paid. The unsecured debt's not so much, but in this case scenario, we want to keep her current on everything. So she's paying her insurance, she's paying her car insurance. So I want to say insurance, health insurance, car insurance, phone, her utilities. All of those things in her budget, and she has about $250 left over. So for the next 4 months, we're going to have her save $1,000, which would be considered an emergency fund. So she's unable to use these credit cards because she's only making minimum payments, right? So by putting $1,000, it gives her a little breathing room. Once those 4 months are over, she now has a $2,400 kicker from her retirement that's coming in on a monthly basis. So by setting that up, you can use that additional $2,400 every single month to pay down that $30,000 in debt. By doing so, she's going to be able to get out of debt within the next 12 to 15 months. That's a lot better than going through a debt settlement program that's going to take 36 months. It's going to have an effect on her credit. When she doesn't have to go through the effect on her credit, why would you? Especially because she has just the ability to pay off her debt. Debt settlement's made for someone in a financial hardship, which it would be a great situation for this lady, and it would help her if she didn't have the extra money coming in starting in February of next year. So for her case scenario, I think she was very delighted to actually kind of get a plan and seeing what it is. It's not a service we offer, but on our side, we definitely want to make sure we're letting the people know there are other options out there, and she's going to use that snowball method to pay off her debt and get out of those credit card debts, and then start living off her income. And she's going to start building off her income and getting more. Once the debt's paid off, she'll be able to start saving more money, and then in the future, she already has a retirement that she's invested into, so that'll be a good situation for her. So that could be something that's relatable for you. There's another situations I want to go over. I had a younger gentleman. He was 26 years old last week. He was in an unfortunate situation where he took on a lot of debt to help his mom out. So he was in $22,000 in credit card debt. He's by himself when it comes to his income. He only makes about $2,400 a month after taxes. And he was in a situation where he actually added up his income, when he put his income and then we took all of his expenses out, he was kind of in the negative. He literally had minus $50 left over every single month after cutting everything out of his budget. So usually for someone who's in a young situation, I usually try to, is there any way possible to move back home? Is there any way possible to get less on your rent? Is there any way possible to cut those expenses as much as possible? In this person's case scenario, there isn't. So there wasn't the ability to, cut back to put more towards the debt to pay off the debt. So he was in a situation where he was in all three of those situations we talk about. Number one, not having enough money left over at the end of the month when he's done paying his bills. Number two, having absolutely no money in the bank. And then number three, not foreseeing any increase in income in the next couple months. So for a debt settlement process, even in his young age, it actually would work for him. There are other options like bankruptcy, which he definitely wanted to look at. He came back after that saying, hey, listen, this is the process that he wanted to go into. So we gladly are able to help him out. So again, someone who's younger, still, this is a process that could help depending on their financial situation, right? Let's go to another person. A married couple in their mid-50s, $74,000 in credit card debt. They have children, but they're all out of the house, and it just comes down to now they're in a situation where they realize, hey, listen, they need some help. We looked at all options that were out there for them. Unfortunately, they're behind on their debts, and a debt settlement process would work for them because now they're saving about $400 or $500 a month in their situation, able to get out of the debts within the next 3 to 4 years, compared to staying in the same situation that they're currently in, struggling to try to get up and make those minimum payments. They didn't have any money left over at the end of the month. They didn't have any money in savings. They spent the majority of the money in savings trying to pay off their debts, and they had some hiccups along the way. They'll be the first to tell you they had some hiccups to the point of where they were buying things and doing things and financing things that they probably should have done, but they did. So they were in a unique financial situation, and everyone's situation is different, right? So we were able to help them with the debt settlement process, save money. Number one, on a monthly basis right away, able to get them in a situation where they can, put money towards the debt settlement process and realize, hey, listen, I'm going to be out of these debts in the next 3 or 4 years, compared to if I'm just trying to struggle to put money towards the debt that I currently have just by making minimum payments. It would take them 20, 25 years. They didn't believe how long it would take by making minimum payments or getting caught up on their minimum payments, how long it would take to actually to pay off their credit cards. The wife actually called the credit card companies, and the credit card companies said that they would give them a relief for 3 months of no payments, no minimum payments. Okay. So the reality is that if you call your creditors, they do give you some type of option sometimes when it comes to getting help on your debts. But the reality is that unless you have, that's why I always go over those 3 situations. Unless you have more money coming in to actually start paying off the debt, that little relief of 3 months doesn't really do a lot for someone trying to pay off their debt. It just kind of puts a Band-Aid over a bullet wound. So again, we were able to help them out into a debt settlement process and be able to save them money. And the focus was not necessarily on the credit, because the credit already had some bumps and bruises from being behind on the debt. The focus is getting out of debt. for these people in their situations, if they were to get back into that situation of just making minimum payments or get caught back up, it would take them 25 plus years. They're in their mid 50s. We're talking about someone who's going to be in their late 70s, early 80s. If they continue to stay in that situation, why not look at another option where you're going to be out of the debts in 3 or 4 years? They're going to be in their early, late 50s, early 60s with nothing but time ahead of them. The reality is they're going to probably live another 30, 40, 50 years. Just with modern technology, everyone's going to start living a bit longer. So they have a bunch of time to, reestablish themselves and get out of these debt situations. So I believe that actually was a good process for them with the debt settlement program. We have one more. I like going over these just because I think that, again, it's all about being, relating to somebody, right? In this case scenario, we had a lady in her early 40s. She just went through a divorce, and she has $52,000. Sorry about that, $53,000 in credit card debt. Now, her situation was a little unique, and just like everyone's situation is. She was in having money left over at the end of the month, but having no savings. So she had about $450 left over at the end of the month with absolutely no savings and no foreseeable increase in income. So if she didn't have any money left over at the end of the month, I would say, hey, listen, a debt settlement process may be good for her. But after we went over her budget, we started looking at exactly where she can cut off some things. She probably has anywhere between $600 and $700 left over every single month that she could put towards the debt. So my advice to her, and what we actually came to an agreement on for her, was the snowball method we talked about in one of our previous cases, right? Previous scenarios with one of our clients. Again, we don't provide that service, but we just explain what options are out there for them, right? So if in her scenario, I'd like her to save that $1,000 emergency fund, and then use that, $600 to $700 to $800 left over at the end of the month towards the smallest debt all the way up to the largest. So you list your debts from largest to smallest, and then you just work them. You're on your way up. In this case scenario, in her case scenario, she had about $1,000 on one of her lowest credit cards. She puts that additional money plus the minimum payment towards that debt until it's paid off. So pretty much what she's doing is she's making all the minimum payments on all of her credit card debts outside of the one that she's paying the $600, $700 more upon. So in her scenario, she'd be out of debt probably within about 50 to 60 months. So maybe a little bit less than that. I think 45, 50 months is what it was. So those are the scenarios I want to go over in this podcast video. I hope that they maybe relate to anyone that who's listening, if they relate to you. The reality is that those three situations are key to anyone enrolling into a debt settlement process. If you aren't in those three situations, there's going to be options that are out there for you, whether that's a personal loan, unsecured personal loan, whether that's credit counseling, a debt management program, whether that's debt settlements, whether that's bankruptcy, whether that's a snowball method, the strategy of the debt snowball or the strategy of the debt avalanche. Whatever options are out there for you in your specific situations, we definitely can go over with you. That being said, I hope you guys have a good rest of the day. This has been our weekly Smart Debt Relief podcast that we're going to be starting here. And I hope you guys have a good rest of the day.